The winter afternoon seemed ordinary as a little girl trudged home from school, her footsteps heavy and her usually bright eyes downcast. Something had changed in her over the past few months. The child who once skipped to school now dragged her feet, making every excuse imaginable to stay home. Her parents noticed the subtle shifts first. Their daughter, who used to enthusiastically share stories about her day, now quietly picked at her dinner. The colorful drawings that once covered their refrigerator became less frequent. Her mother found unopened lunchboxes, the food untouched, hidden at the bottom of her backpack. One particularly concerning evening, while helping her get ready for bed, her mother noticed her daughter flinching when brushing her hair, not from tangles, but from what seemed like stress. The young girl's hands trembled as she clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, a gift from her grandma that she'd never shown fear of holding before. Her father, a gentle man who worked as a software engineer, grew increasingly worried. His daughter's grades had started slipping, despite her being a bright student who once loved learning. Parent-teacher conferences yielded nothing but dismissive responses from the administration. Children go through phases, they said. She's probably just seeking attention. But he knew his daughter. This wasn't attention-seeking. This was fear. He noticed how she would grip his hand tighter when approaching her classroom, how she would freeze momentarily before entering the school building. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and the school's casual dismissal of his concerns only deepened his suspicion. The breaking point came during a quiet Sunday evening. While coloring together, his daughter accidentally knocked over her water cup. Instead of laughing it off as she usually would, she burst into tears, trembling, and repeatedly apologizing. Through her sobs, she mentioned something about a special corner in class where students were sent for punishment. She wouldn't elaborate further, her small frame shaking with fear at just the mention of it. That night, after tucking his daughter into bed, he sat in his home office, his mind racing. The school had brushed off his concerns, but he knew deep in his heart that his child wasn't lying. Years of working with technology had taught him that sometimes the best evidence is the kind that can't be denied, recorded proof. The next day, he visited several electronics stores, finally finding a tiny voice recorder, small enough to be concealed yet powerful enough to capture classroom sounds clearly. That evening, as he showed the device to his wife, they debated the ethics of their decision. But seeing their daughter's diminishing spirit left them feeling they had no choice. With gentle hands, he carefully worked the small recorder into a decorative hair clip, disguising it among the ribbons and bows. He explained to his daughter that this was like a special guardian angel, watching over her at school. For the first time in weeks, he saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. As she headed to school the next morning, the recorder safely hidden in her hair, her father watched her walk away, his heart heavy with both hope and anxiety. He had no idea that this simple device would soon uncover a truth that would shake their entire community to its core. The father sat at his desk, anxiety gnawing at his stomach as he waited for his daughter to return from school. The tiny recorder he'd hidden in her hair clip could reveal what was really happening in that classroom, or it could prove that he was being an overprotective parent. Either way, he needed to know. As soon as his wife brought their daughter home from school, he carefully removed the hair clip and downloaded the day's recording. His hands trembled slightly as he plugged in his headphones. What he heard made his blood run cold. The recording started normally enough. Morning announcements, children settling into their seats, the routine sounds of a classroom coming to life. But then the atmosphere changed. The teacher's voice, sweet and professional during parent meetings, transformed into something entirely different. Get to the corner. The teacher's voice boomed through his headphones. You're all worthless. Can't even follow simple instructions. The sound of a ruler slapping against a desk made him flinch. The teacher's tirade continued, berating students for minor mistakes, threatening to call their parents for imagined misdeeds, and using psychological tactics that no child should ever experience. His daughter's quiet sniffles in the background broke his heart. Other children could be heard whimpering too, their fear palpable even through the recording. The teacher's footsteps, sharp and menacing, paced the classroom like a predator. During lunch break, he could hear his daughter's whispered conversation with another student. "My tummy hurts every morning now," the other child confided. "I told my mom I was sick, but she didn't believe me." His daughter's response was barely audible. "Me too. Nobody believes us." The father felt a mix of emotions wash over him: rage at the teacher's behavior, guilt for not believing his daughter sooner, and determination to protect not just his child, but all the students in that classroom. But he knew he needed more evidence. One day of recording might be dismissed as an isolated incident. He spent the next day at work distracted, his mind constantly wandering to his daughter in that classroom. When she came home that evening, he downloaded the second day's recording. The pattern continued: more emotional abuse, more threats, more children being reduced to tears. By the third day, he had enough evidence to build a solid case. Hours of recordings revealed a systematic pattern of emotional abuse. The teacher would pick on different students each day, ensuring everyone lived in constant fear of being the next target. She had perfected the art of intimidation while maintaining plausible deniability with the school administration. That evening, he sat with his wife, playing select portions of the recordings. She covered her mouth in horror, tears streaming down her face as she listened. Their daughter, finally feeling validated, curled up in her mother's lap, relief evident in her small frame. They knew they couldn't wait any longer. Tomorrow, they would take action. The school board would have to listen now. They had irrefutable proof. But as they made their plans for the next day, they had no idea just how many other families had been silently dealing with the same nightmare. The morning arrived with a sense of purpose. The father had spent hours the previous night preparing the evidence, organizing the recordings chronologically, documenting specific incidents, and making detailed notes of dates and times. His wife had barely slept, torn between anxiety of confronting the school and relief that they finally had proof. Their daughter, sensing the shift in the household's energy, hugged her father extra tight before leaving for school. "You won't have to go back there if you don't want to," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She nodded, squeezing him harder before joining her mother in the car. At 9 a.m. sharp, the father walked into the school board office, a laptop and 3 USB drives containing the recordings tucked safely in his briefcase. The secretary's eyes widened when he mentioned having evidence of classroom misconduct. Within minutes, he was ushered into a conference room where the principal and 2 board members sat waiting. As he set up his laptop, his hands steady despite his racing heart, he noticed the skeptical expressions on their faces. They dismissed concerns before, but this time was different. This time, he had proof. The first recording filled the room. The teacher's voice, dripping with contempt, echoed off the walls. The principal's face drained of color as she heard one of her staff members berating a child for asking to use the bathroom. The board members exchanged troubled glances as the verbal abuse continued. "There's more," the father said quietly, playing segments from different days. Each clip revealed the same pattern: systematic emotional abuse, manipulation, and intimidation. The children's frightened whispers and muffled sobs painted a vivid picture of their daily torment. Halfway through the presentation, the door opened. Another parent, there for a different meeting, stopped in her tracks as she heard the teacher's voice. "That's the voice my son mimics in his nightmares," she whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Word spread quickly. By lunchtime, the school office was flooded with calls from other parents. Their stories were eerily similar. Children who had become withdrawn, who made up illnesses to avoid school, who cried without explanation. But they had all been told they were overreacting, that their children were just going through phases. The school board called an emergency meeting. Parents filled the room, many in tears as they finally understood what their children had been enduring. Some shared their own recordings, taken after their children's behavior changed, but before they had proof. Others brought their children's drawings, dark and troubling images that now made terrible sense. The father stood at the podium, his voice unwavering as he addressed the crowd. "We trusted you with our children," he said to the school officials. "We trusted you to protect them, to nurture them, to help them grow. Instead, you dismissed our concerns and allowed this abuse to continue." As the meeting progressed, it became clear that this wasn't just about one teacher or one classroom. It was about a system that had failed to protect its most vulnerable members. The parents in that room were no longer just individuals, they had become a united force determined to create change. The aftermath of the school board meeting spread like wildfire through the community. The teacher was immediately placed on administrative leave, but this was just the beginning. The recordings had opened a door that couldn't be closed, revealing years of systematic problems within the school system. Local news stations picked up the story, carefully protecting the identities of the children involved. The father's recordings, with voices altered to protect privacy, played on evening news segments. Parents from other schools started coming forward, sharing similar experiences that had gone unaddressed. The school district launched a formal investigation, bringing in educational experts and child psychologists. They interviewed students individually, with parents present, creating a safe space for children to share their experiences. The stories that emerged painted a disturbing picture of long-term emotional abuse. The father's daughter, still attending a different classroom in the same school, started showing small signs of recovery. When asked if she wanted to transfer to another school, she surprisingly declined. "I want to stay with my friends," she said quietly. "We help each other now." Her words revealed how the children had formed their own support system, protecting and comforting one another. A group of parents formed an advocacy committee, meeting weekly in the local library. They researched similar cases across the country, consulted with educational experts, and drafted proposals for new classroom monitoring policies. The father's technical background proved invaluable as they explored various classroom monitoring solutions that would protect both students and teachers. The teacher's personnel file revealed previous complaints that had been dismissed or buried. Former students, now in high school, came forward with their own stories. Some had struggled with anxiety and trust issues for years, finally understanding the root cause of their fears. Support groups formed for both parents and children. Weekly meetings became a place of healing, where families shared their experiences and worked through their emotions together. Child psychologists volunteered their time, helping families understand and address the trauma their children had experienced. The father's daughter began keeping a diary, encouraged by her counselor. Her writings showed a gradual transformation from fear to strength. "Today, I helped a new kid in class," one entry read. "I told her she's safe now because we all look out for each other." The school board faced mounting pressure to implement systemic changes. Security cameras were installed in classrooms, with strict guidelines to protect student privacy. A new anonymous reporting system was developed, allowing students and parents to report concerns without fear of retaliation. As winter turned to spring, signs of healing began to emerge throughout the community. Children who had once dreaded school started participating in class again. Parents reported fewer nightmares, fewer stomach aches, fewer tearful mornings. The father's simple act of hiding a recorder in his daughter's hair had sparked a revolution in how the community protected its children. The investigation into the classroom incident reached a critical point as spring approached. The school district's formal inquiry had uncovered disturbing patterns that went far beyond a single classroom. Through careful interviews with students, investigators learned that the teacher had mastered the art of appearing professional during observations while maintaining an atmosphere of fear when supervisors weren't present. During one particularly moving interview, a quiet boy brought in a stack of drawings he'd made throughout the school year. The pictures told a story of transformation, from bright, colorful scenes at the start of the year to dark, shadowy images as the months progressed. The child psychologist noted how the drawings revealed a clear pattern of emotional distress. Parents continued sharing their stories at community meetings. One mother broke down as she described finding her child's diary, filled with entries begging not to go to school. Another father shared how his son had started biting his nails until they bled, a habit that emerged shortly after the school year began. The recordings captured by the father became central to the investigation. Technology experts analyzed them, confirming their authenticity and timing. Each day's recording revealed new layers of psychological manipulation. The teacher had created an environment where students were afraid to speak up, convinced that either no one would believe them or that things would get worse if they did. The impact on the children's academic performance became clearer as the investigation progressed. Grade records showed a consistent decline among students in that classroom. What was initially dismissed as normal variations now painted a picture of children too stressed to learn effectively. The father's daughter, who had sparked this investigation, began showing signs of her old self returning. Her nightmares became less frequent, and her appetite improved. During a session with her counselor, she drew a picture of her classroom. But this time, instead of dark colors and scared faces, she used bright colors and added smiling children. Support groups continued growing, with new families joining each week. The meetings became a place of healing and action planning. Parents shared strategies for helping their children rebuild trust in teachers and education. Children formed friendships based on shared experiences and mutual support. The school board faced increasing pressure to make substantial changes. They began drafting new policies requiring regular psychological evaluations for teachers, mandatory reporting of all disciplinary actions, and improved communication channels between parents and administration. The father's technical expertise proved valuable as they designed new monitoring systems that would protect both student privacy and safety. As the investigation neared its conclusion, the community's focus shifted from uncovering the truth to preventing similar incidents in the future. The simple act of a father trusting his instincts and taking action had sparked a movement that would protect countless children in the years to come. The investigation reached a turning point when the father presented his extensive collection of recordings to law enforcement. The police department assigned a special investigator who specialized in cases involving schools and minors. The evidence painted a clear picture of sustained emotional abuse that couldn't be ignored. During closed-door meetings, police investigators played selected portions of the recordings for school board officials. The tension in the room was palpable as they listened to a teacher, once trusted with young minds, systematically breaking down children's confidence. The investigator pointed out specific instances that crossed from strict discipline into clear emotional abuse. The father worked closely with the authorities, providing technical details about the recordings. He explained how he'd carefully documented each file, creating a clear timeline of events. His methodical approach proved invaluable as the investigation expanded beyond his daughter's classroom. Meanwhile, the parent support group had grown into a powerful advocacy organization. They began researching similar cases nationwide, discovering that their situation wasn't unique. Other communities had faced similar challenges, and some had developed effective solutions. The group started drafting proposals for policy changes based on these successful models. The school district's legal team became involved, reviewing years of archived complaints. They uncovered a troubling pattern. Similar reports had been filed against the teacher at previous schools, but the complaints were either dismissed or buried in administrative paperwork. The teacher had simply been transferred from school to school, carrying the problematic behavior to each new location. The children's counseling sessions revealed deeper impacts of the abuse. Many students had developed anxiety about speaking up in class, even in other teachers' classrooms. Some struggled with trust issues, finding it hard to believe that adults would listen to their concerns. The healing process would clearly take time, but having their experiences validated was an important first step. Parents noticed subtle changes in their children as the investigation progressed. Some kids started sleeping better, while others began talking more openly about their school day. The father's daughter surprised everyone by volunteering to help younger students during recess, showing that her experience had strengthened her desire to protect others. As evidence mounted, the investigation expanded to include the school's administration. Questions arose about how such behavior had gone unchecked for so long. The principal faced scrutiny over dismissed complaints, and the school board began reviewing their entire complaint handling system. The local teachers' union also became involved, expressing support for the investigation. They emphasized that such behavior damaged the reputation of all teachers and worked with investigators to develop better screening processes for new hires. The case was becoming a catalyst for system-wide change. As spring turned to summer, the investigation moved into its final phase. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of hours of recordings, testimonies from current and former students, and documented patterns of emotional abuse that spanned years. The teacher's career was effectively over, but the impact of the case reached far beyond one classroom. The school board called an emergency session to address the findings. The meeting hall was packed with parents, teachers, and community members. The father who started it all sat quietly in the back, his daughter's empty hair clip in his pocket, a reminder of how a small act of protection had sparked a movement. The board members presented their findings with grave faces. The recordings revealed more than just harsh words. They expose a systematic pattern of emotional manipulation. The teacher had created an environment of fear, using subtle threats and psychological pressure to maintain control. Students were pitted against each other, made to feel worthless, and convinced that speaking up would only make things worse. The district superintendent stood at the podium, his voice steady but emotional. He announced immediate changes: mandatory psychological evaluations for all teaching staff, installation of audio monitoring systems in classrooms, and a complete overhaul of the complaint investigation process. The old system of quietly transferring problematic teachers between schools would end. Parents shared impact statements, describing how their children had changed during the school year. A mother spoke about her once outgoing child becoming withdrawn and anxious. A father described finding his son crying in the bathroom before school. Each story added weight to the evidence, showing how deep the wounds ran. The teachers' union representatives pledged their support for the new measures. They emphasized that protecting students also meant protecting the integrity of the teaching profession. Good teachers had nothing to fear from increased oversight. In fact, many welcomed it as a way to rebuild trust with families. The father's daughter, sitting between her parents, listened as her story became part of something bigger. Her small nod of approval when the new safety measures were announced spoke volumes. She had found her voice again, and her courage was helping ensure other children wouldn't face similar experiences. Local education officials from neighboring districts attended the meeting, taking notes and asking questions. The case was becoming a model for how to handle similar situations. The father's meticulous documentation and the community's united response had created a blueprint for addressing classroom abuse. As the meeting concluded, the superintendent made one final announcement: the creation of a student advocacy office, staffed by trained professionals who would serve as direct liaisons between students, parents, and administration. The father's daughter squeezed his hand tight. They both knew that while they couldn't change the past, they had helped create a safer future for countless children. The weeks following the school board meeting brought significant changes to the educational community. News of the investigation spread to neighboring districts, prompting them to review their own policies. Education officials from across the state began studying what was now being called the hidden recorder case as an example of how communities could protect their students. The teacher faced a formal disciplinary hearing. The evidence was damning: years of documented abuse, multiple witness testimonies, and most crucially, the recordings that started it all. The State Education Board moved to permanently revoke her teaching license, ensuring she could never work with children again in any educational capacity. The impact on the children began showing positive signs. Group therapy sessions, initially filled with tears and anxiety, slowly transformed into spaces of healing and friendship. Children who had once been too scared to speak now shared their experiences openly, supporting one another through the recovery process. The father's daughter made remarkable progress. During a therapy session, she drew a picture of her classroom. But this time, Instead of dark colors and scared faces, she filled the page with bright colors and smiling children. Her counselor noted how this simple drawing represented a significant step in her healing journey. The school implemented its new safety measures with remarkable speed. Audio monitoring systems were installed in classrooms, with strict privacy protocols in place. The Student Advocacy Office opened its doors, staffed by trained professionals who knew how to listen to and support young voices. Teachers underwent intensive training on positive disciplinary methods and emotional intelligence. Many expressed relief at the new systems, saying they felt more supported in their roles. The fear of false accusations decreased as the transparent monitoring system protected both students and teachers. Parents reported significant changes in their children's behavior. The morning battles to get kids to school decreased. Nightmares became less frequent. Children started talking about their school days again, sharing positive experiences with their families. The dark cloud that had hung over the school community began to lift. The father's technological expertise proved invaluable as other schools sought advice on implementing similar safety measures. He worked with education officials to develop guidelines for classroom monitoring that balanced student safety with privacy concerns. His daughter watched proudly as her father turned their painful experience into a force for positive change. 1 year had passed since the hidden recorder incident, and the changes it sparked had transformed the educational landscape. The father sat in his daughter's new classroom during an open house, watching her confidently explain her science project to visiting parents. The fearful child of last year had blossomed into a strong, supportive student who helped newcomers feel welcome. The school district's new policies became a model for educational systems nationwide. Regular classroom monitoring, combined with enhanced teacher training and student support services, created an environment where both students and teachers could thrive. The father's recordings, which started as a desperate attempt to protect his child, had sparked a revolution in classroom safety. The parent advocacy group continued their work, expanding their focus to help other communities implement similar protective measures. They developed resources for parents who suspected classroom issues, emphasizing the importance of documenting concerns and working with school administrators to address problems early. The former teacher's case became a landmark example in educational reform. Teacher training programs across the country now included extensive sections on emotional abuse prevention and positive disciplinary techniques. The case studies helped future educators understand the profound impact their words and actions could have on young minds. The children from that difficult year stayed connected through their shared experience. Many became peer mentors, helping other students find their voices. The father's daughter, in particular, showed a special talent for spotting when classmates needed support, often being the first to reach out to struggling students. The school board's commitment to transparency and safety never wavered. Regular parent forums, student feedback sessions, and teacher evaluations became standard practice. The monitoring systems, once viewed with skepticism by some, proved valuable in protecting both students and teachers from false accusations. The father's daughter surprised everyone when she announced her dream of becoming a teacher herself. "I want to make sure every classroom is a happy place," she explained during dinner one evening. Her parents exchanged proud glances, knowing their family's difficult journey had helped pave the way for positive change. Looking back, the father realized that his simple act of trust, believing his daughter when others dismissed her, had created ripples far beyond their family. The hidden recorder had exposed more than just one teacher's misconduct. It had revealed the power of parents standing up for their children and the importance of creating safe spaces for young voices to be heard. As another school year began, the father watched his daughter walk confidently into her classroom, her backpack decorated with encouraging messages she'd written for her classmates. The dark days of fear were behind them, replaced by a future where children felt safe, valued, and heard. The hidden recorder case had become more than just a story of exposure. It was a testament to how one parent's love and determination could transform an entire educational system.